Does Jinx need to be ranged Darius, though? One of my teammates ints, and it instantly wipes my team because Jinx got 200% move speed. So the thing about Jinx, and look, I'm a very biased here because I made Jinx, and I think Jinx is generally fair when she's not OP, which right now she's probably OP. Jinx's reset is very gated by the fact that she's an immobile champion without it, right? So Jinx gets a kill, pops off, kills everybody. Is that a true statement? Yes. But then also, if Jinx doesn't get a kill, what's she going to do against Kha'Zix? The answer is run a Lulu on her team. I get it, started Sun, but whatever. It's like, if Jinx doesn't get a kill, what's she going to do against Kha'Zix? And on top of that, if Jinx gets a kill, the thing she's getting is move speed. So like, you know, if you get a kill and then get stunned, that's going to be kind of rough. Jinx's passive is like, in many situations, not nearly as good as like, say, Tristana W, which is just like, I just jump out, right? So I would argue Jinx's passive is one of like the more fair things in her kit, where it's like, yeah, it definitely feels insane when she kills someone, but the story of how Jinx kills someone tends to be more reasonable than if like we just gave her move speed up front, as an example, or anything like that. All that said, Jinx is strong right now, right? I get it, Jinx is strong right now. But we've had many metas where Jinx is decent win rate and totally fair and kind of weak, right? So it's like not like Jinx's passive is just perma-broken. Yeah. I think I have a problem that I have a hard time separating myself mentally from work when I'm not at work. And so whenever I've got something on work that I'm like really thinking hard about and focusing on a lot, it's hard to relax, it's hard to take a break because I'm just always thinking about it. And that's the case right now. As an example from when I was a younger designer, which I don't do this at least anymore, but when I was working on Jinx, I was trying to get her passive locked down. And I remember one night I woke up at 3 in the morning because I'd had a dream about Jinx's passive. I'd been thinking about it so much that I actually started dreaming about it. And then I ran into the office and implemented it for playtest the next day at 3 a.m. That did not end up being her final passive. That ended up being, it ended up being a tank pattern, which years later, surprise Pikachu face, I put something similar on Zeri, and that didn't work out as well as I'd hoped. But the passive I woke up and went and implemented actually was, I called it Insanity. And basically what it was if Jinx stayed in combat for 10 seconds straight, she would go crazy, and she would gain a ton of stats. So basically her minigun would gain double the attack speed and break the attack speed cap. So like, think like back when Kog'Maw got double attack speed, it was like that. So if you stayed in combat for 10 seconds, your minigun would go crazy. And then the rockets would basically get a free full damage hurricane shot. So she'd shoot 2 rockets instead of 1. So she'd basically double up her damage with the rockets in an AoE, whereas the minigun would double up the damage at single target. And I actually thought it was really fun. I really wanted to ship that passive, but my design lead at the time, it was Morello, shut it down. He was like, no, you can't do this. I think he was right, by the way. And the reason he didn't think it was a good idea is he was like, hey, dude, this is not an AD carry passive. This is a tank passive. This isn't about, like, playing the AD carry game. This is about buying a lot of defense and not dying and then eventually winning because you stacked defense and then got a bunch of free damage eventually. And the reason I bring up Zeri is that Zeri's ultimate plays out a lot like that, especially when it came out. It's less skewed that way nowadays, but Zeri's ultimate on release was basically, if you don't die, you will eventually reach a point of speed where you can kill everybody. And so Zeri on release was a lot more bruiser, especially when she worked with Trinity Force. What do I think about a champ that could change the map terrain by creating new rocks, removing parts of walls? I mean, I think that could be a cool champ. I think there's 2 questions about a champ that could change terrain. One is, how do we make it look good? As an example, Jinx's grenades used to light brush on fire, and we canceled it because we didn't have a way to make brush on fire look good. Like, we couldn't make burning brush. That wasn't a thing. League of Legends map isn't really made to be, like, modified in real time. And so one part about creating terrain is, well, how do you make it look good? Creating and destroying terrain. If you're, like, trying to, like, make it mesh with other terrain. It's different if you're doing, like, an Anivia wall, right? That one's easy. You just do a wall, right? And then the other thing about creating terrain is also just, what is the actual fun gameplay from it? You might be like, there's tons of fun gameplay, and it's like sometimes that's true. Like again, Anivia Wall is really, really cool, but there's a lot of like takes on creating terrain where it's like, yeah, and I changed this jungle path for a long period of time that just end up confusing people and making the game kind of worse without actually giving that champion any real amount of power. Like long-term terrain creation, as an example, is a very strategic kind of play, and in League of Legends, a lot of players really aren't interested in something that's that long form of a strategy. League of Legends tends to be a game that is often about more upfront power. Doesn't mean that League doesn't have strategic plays and things like that, but it's just a question of like, okay, if you can alter jungle paths, as an example, with permanent terrain creation, how fun is that for the player to do it, and how interesting is that for the player to do it versus like how weird is it to play against, or how powerful is it to play against in things like pro play? That is the complexity there, I think. And so, is League dying? No, not really. League doesn't have as many players as it used to, but I think one thing that you have to understand about League is it's a pretty giant game, and always has been. Like, it's just really, 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 really big, and has always been really big. And so like League having less players, it's like it's a game that's like, okay, it's a massive game going to a somewhat less massive game, if that makes sense. That said, if I was to say like any concerns about, hey, is League dying or things like that, I think the big thing is just like, what are the games that the younger generation is playing, right? And I think one thing about League is that is true, is that its player base is aging. And I think for a game to continue into infinity and beyond, it always needs to capture like the younger generation. I think this is one thing about like, say, a game like Minecraft as an example, is Minecraft is a game that it's like Legos on the PC or on your phone or on the Xbox or whatever, and that actually is a great formula for always capturing the next generation of players, because there's always going to be a lot of younger players who are just like, I freaking love Minecraft, right? And so Minecraft's an incredible game, and it is, going to probably, it just keeps appealing to like just new generations of players every single year, right? So yeah. So to me, it's like, how do you take a game and keep making it cool? Because there's a lot of games that'll like pop off for a limited amount of time, and then they'll like, they'll like just kind of disappear. Because a lot of things go in fads. Like there's like, here's this game, everybody's playing it, and then they move on. And now everybody's playing this game, they move on, etc., etc. And so for something to last a really, really long time, that, like, how do you go from being a fad to being something like people keep coming back to? So another thing you have to think about when you're like a dev working on games that like you need to keep moving forward, always capturing new generations of players, is the play habits of people change over time. So as an example, here's one thing that's changed over the last, like, say 10 years is phones. Phone games are way bigger than they ever were. And before League came out, here's the thing that changed when League came out, and around the time League came out, is like the idea of free-to-play games. And so nowadays, a lot more games are free-to-play, and that's like one of the major ways to capture players, where, back in the early 2000s, like, everything was a box product, and the stuff that was free-to-play was seen as like the weird, low-quality scam games, as opposed to like, legitimate, like, awesome experiences you could have, like Fortnite or something like that. And so like nowadays, another thing that they're seeing, which is crazy to think about and makes me feel really, really old, is kids are being raised with things like iPads, which means that there's a lot of kids and young adults that don't really know how to use a mouse and keyboard, especially in the context of playing a game. And there's a lot of kids that don't really know even how to use a controller. Like this is kind of foreign to some kids nowadays, because it all depends on what you grow up playing. And so there's just a lot of different things you have to think about for like the next generation of games, when it comes to the fact that just how people grow up and experience things has changed. So like, as an example, one of the, I'd say, advantages League had when it came out, specifically when it came out, was it was made off of RTS's controls. So League has RTS controls. We're talking games like StarCraft 2, StarCraft, Warcraft 3, stuff like that. And so at the time, RTSs were one of the more popular game genres. And so if you came in to play League, you kind of already knew how to control the game a lot of the time because it was based off something that everybody was very familiar with. Nowadays, people, like, RTSs are kind of like an almost dead genre. Like, there aren't really any RTSs that people play a lot of anymore. And so there's just so much fewer people who understand RTS controls. And so a lot of players who want to try League of Legends, they'll come in and the controls will actually be very foreign to them and very awkward and weird because they didn't grow up playing RTSs. This is actually, oh, Spider Axe, by the way. Thank you for the 71 months, dude. I didn't notice it. Let me finish this thought and I'll get to your question that you asked. Poposhi, good to see you. It's been a bit. Another thing that's like wild to think about in regards to, actually wait, everybody, my train of thought, my train of thought just stopped. What was I talking about? It was RTSs and how people play them. Can anybody remember what it was? Controls. Train of thoughts. God, what was I talking about? Questions about dying game? Yeah, it was RTS controls. Let's see. Yeah, people grow up and they don't play RTS. Oh, yeah. Oh, so it's about Overwatch, actually. Yeah, old brain. I lose my train of thought. Like, my mind is just leaving me. I was going to talk about Overwatch, actually. So, Overwatch, when it came out, I think one of its competitive advantages, and one of the brilliant things they did, was they made, in Overwatch, FPS games playable to people who didn't grow up playing FPS games. And I think that was a huge deal for how successful Overwatch was when it came out. Now, there's a lot of things that Overwatch did that were successful and awesome. Like, Overwatch, when it came out, just was doing so many things right. But one of the things is that really opened up that genre to a larger audience, I think, was the fact that, like, you know, if you wanted to play a game like Counter-Strike or whatever, or even Valorant, stuff like that, you're at an advantage if you've grown up playing FPSs because, you know, you learn how to aim with a mouse and keyboard, move around, things like that. But if you're someone who doesn't grow up learning how to play that, it's really, really hard to learn how to aim or move around in a game like CSGO or even Call of Duty, things like that. Whereas Overwatch, they have a lot of characters that just don't require that type of gameplay, right? They have a lot of characters like Mercy or Winston or Roadhog that just have like either no aiming requirements, or if they do have aiming requirements, it's a lot looser or different. And that control scheme, I think Overwatch opened up that game and that genre to a lot of players who normally wouldn't have been able to enjoy it because they just didn't grow up playing FPSs. So that's kind of the deal right there.